The inaugural WellTree Heart2Heart story features Cassie Winter. Cassie Winter grew up obese. Then she became a competitive Ironman, competing at the World Championships in Kona. She faced accidents and a heart attack along the way. This is her story, told just weeks before her next Ironman race and just days before open heart surgery. Thank you so much for joining me today and for sharing your story, which is a incredibly inspiring one.
It's a pleasure to be here.
Cassie, if I'm not mistaken, you are 2 weeks away from Ironman Lake Placid, and you're 1 month away from having open heart surgery. That's probably a one-two punch that not many people have experienced in such close proximity.
Yeah, it's an interesting time to be looking ahead at both of them. This is going to be my ninth Ironman. I've been doing them since 2012, but this will be the first one that I do an Ironman and then 18 days later have open heart surgery.
That's incredible. So, as you sit here now, which of those two events are you more nervous about?
I would say that I'm a little bit more nervous about the open heart surgery because it's new to me. Whereas, like I said, an Ironman, I have done several times. And the way I have approached this training has been very different because I've had a heart rate cap. And so it's at a very low intensity. And so just being able to do this at an easy effort without pushing myself too hard, I know that I'm going to be able to finish. It won't be a PR, but I will have the satisfaction of finishing.
Yeah. Anytime you cross an Ironman finish line is something to be proud of.
Yes.
You have a heart rate cap. Can you tell me what the heart rate cap looks like and how your heart rate now differs from previous times when you trained for an Ironman?
Sure. So back in 2022, I actually had a heart attack while training for Kona. And at that point in time, we dropped my heart rate cap to 155 beats per minute. And I was still able to push threshold work at that point in time, but just not any of the O2 max. And so we continued moving along that path for 3 years while we monitored my bicuspid valve. So during that heart attack session, there were no blockages. It was just simply my body required more oxygen than I was giving it because my valve was narrowing and getting thicker. So my heart wasn't performing as well.
Okay.
And so then back in March, I had started to have chest pain again. And this particular echocardiogram showed that now I was at a critical level and we needed to really start thinking about an intervention. And I have a great cardiology team that knows what I do. And so they said, okay, well, what happens when you train? And I said, well, as long as I keep my heart rate under 130, then I feel good. And they said, well, that's your new heart rate cap, is just don't go over 130.
Oh, wow.
And yeah. And so they continued to allow me to train. And then we started doing all of the diagnostics to get ready for surgery.
That's interesting. How has that impacted you emotionally, knowing that you're training, you've got this limit, and something could go wrong potentially? I mean, that limit is somewhat arbitrary. Do you think about that while you're training?
A little bit. At the very beginning, I did a lot because, whenever you read a report that it says critical, then things start going through your head. The thing that made me most nervous was swimming,
Hmm.
particularly open water swimming. And I was meeting with my cardiologist and I said, Doc, I'm nervous about drowning. And he said, you're not going to drown. He says, what's going to happen is you're going to have a heart attack pushing too hard up a hill. So don't push too hard up a hill. So he was able to keep my level of anxiety down. And if he was going to let me continue to do this, he wouldn't put me at risk.
Okay.
But yeah, to be honest, I was afraid of drowning. You'd be out in the lake somewhere, and even if you are swimming with someone, they're not going to get to you fast enough.
Yeah. So this is interesting. I want to table the discussion around your heart for a minute because I think Your origin story is really interesting. And I want to wind back the clock because you weren't always an Ironman athlete. In fact, you weren't always an athlete. And your story is interesting from so many levels. But one of the things that's most interesting about your story is that you grew up as a child who struggled with obesity. Can you talk a
Yes.
little bit about that and what that was like for you as a child?
Sure. So I was a kid that was overweight. My family celebrated everything with food. You get straight A's, you get banana splits.
Mhm.
And so as a child, my first medical diet was actually a liquid diet that I had 330 calories a day. So we were trying to get my weight under control. But when you eat Twinkies and Hostess cupcakes, you just consume too many calories. So I came from a family of people who were overweight. We all yo-yo dieted together, my mother, my father, my brother, and we'd go up and down. We tried all of the diets. So we did Atkins, we did low fat, we did Weight Watchers, all of them, cabbage soup diet, a Dolly Parton diet, any diet that you've ever heard of, we tried it. But the weight would always come back. And we were actually quite active as kids. It's just that we outate our activity. We biked to school, biked to the library. We had a pool in the backyard, so we spent the summer playing chase and doing all the things. But my lunch for school was you would take a little Debbie for snack, and then you would have a peanut butter and jelly and a bag of potato chips. And I never had a piece of fruit or vegetable in my lunch.
That was life in I think we are roughly the same age, grew up in the 70s, 80s, and I think that was life back then.
Oh, yeah.
Twinkies, ho-hos, those were not all that uncommon back then. And I don't think that we were as wise. We didn't have media telling people about watching their weight and all the ills of processed food and everything. So I think that kids these days are much luckier in that sense that there's a lot more awareness around what you put in your body.
Yeah.
How did that make you feel as a child? Did you feel different because you were overweight, or did you blend in? Were you a confident child, and did you have the confidence to overcome any issues with your weight, or was it something that you thought about?
I would say blended. Yes, I felt different. Mrs. Matthews had to make my clothes because in the 70s and 80s, you didn't have plus size. And so I didn't buy clothes off the shelf. But at the same time, I was the smart kid.
Mm.
And so I had that advantage. I had a goal, and I had friends. So even though I was picked on for my weight and felt it, because I had another outlet, it was a little bit easier for me. But I think at the same time, when you know that you're capable of doing some things like being smart, how come I can't lose weight? So the stress is actually more on myself of being a failure from that perspective. I'm smart, and I carried that right into adulthood. I'm smart. How come I can't lose weight? I can do the math, calories in, calories out. And so that was the frustrating part.
You were rewarded for being smart with banana splits. I think you're a mother now. I assume that you're not motivating your kids with banana splits. How did you motivate your kids when they were in school to excel academically?
Obviously, they got money to buy things that they wanted. So they got to earn monetary awards.
Okay. All right. I have a 7.5-year-old, so I'm taking notes as well. She actually does enjoy an ice cream, and we do treat her to an ice cream every once in a while, but try to keep that in check. It sounds like your entire family was probably also overweight. Is that safe to assume?
Oh, absolutely. And then you also combine on my mother's side, she was one of eight, and that whole side of the family were tobacco users. And so you put obesity with tobacco use, and there was not a lot of longevity on my mother's side.
So you went into high school. Did you have relationships in high school? I know you were smart. Did you have good friendships and other relationships, or did the weight hinder that as well?
The weight hindered that to a degree. And so I had a handful of close friends. Definitely not the popular kid, not someone who went out on dates. That wasn't part of who I was. And did I feel left out? Of course. It's like when your friends are dating and you're not, you attribute that to being overweight. So, yes, I'm smart, but I'm not dateable.
Right. And during this entire childhood, did you have any signs of athleticism?
No, when we were out playing softball or baseball, I was the one that was going to get the black eye from missing the ball and hitting it and me getting hit in the face.
I was not really great at baseball. I played baseball growing up, but I always excelled in endurance sports as well. So I think that there's maybe something that we have in common, maybe not great with ball sports, but better with endurance and solo activities. And so you graduated high school. Did you go straight to college after high
No,
school?
graduated high school in 3 years, went to Texas A&M, got a degree in sociology, and then moved back home with my mother in New York because a degree in sociology really doesn't get you a job at the beginning. And became a newspaper reporter, met my husband, had 2 kids, and then eventually went to work for Rome Health, which is the hospital that I work for, and I've been here for 27 years. I'm a grant writer here, and I make our dreams come true.
Okay, so you clearly overcame your childhood obesity. Can you describe what brought that on? You met your husband, so you went from being undateable to ultimately being dateable and marryable. So that's fantastic. And you found somebody who was able to look beyond that. How did you meet your husband and how did that evolve?
Sure. So, kind of ironic. He was in my homeroom in high school for the entire year that I moved to New York. But it was the last 2 weeks before I moved back to Texas that we met. And this was supposed to be just a fling, and I was going to go to college. And then we ended up getting back together like 4 years later after I graduated from college. So it was one of those meant to be kind of things. And by that time, I had pretty much decided that I was done with dieting. The whole cycle of losing weight, regaining it, and then adding that much more. I was just going to be a fat person forever and just stop the craziness. But then I lost my mother. So my mother died at age 60, and she died of COPD, smoking related illness. And she was one of 8, as I mentioned. None of
Mm.
her sisters made it to age 60. They all died of cancer. So all of my aunts died of a smoking related illness, something that was preventable. And so that was a wake up call for me that, okay, I being obese is not acceptable. It's a risk factor that I can change, and I need to do something immediate. Well, immediate for me was take 2 years to actually research gastric bypass surgery. It took me that long to finally make the decision that that was the mechanism I could use to be successful.
Mhm.
And I had to understand what it was going to take to be successful long term, because I had met so many people that even though they take this drastic step of having their insides rewired, that they still somehow manage to eat around it and regain the weight. So I needed to understand all of that before I was willing to go through surgery.
What age were you at this point?
39. And so I had gastric bypass in 2006. And it was really a reset button for me. So, obviously, with gastric bypass, at the very beginning, you're in the honeymoon stage because if you eat too much, you're going to vomit.
Mhm.
You're going to be very, very uncomfortable, and there's a price to pay.
Mhm.
Um, and so I was extremely regimented, and the weight just started melting off. So within 9 months, I had lost over 100 pounds.
That's incredible. Were you a smoker at any point in your life?
No, no, I was the kid that would put black lungs in my mother's birthday card and tell her that I hope you're here next year. I was a mean daughter in terms of trying to influence her to stop smoking.
Well, I would think that looking back, that was one thing that our generation benefited from is some awareness around the ills of smoking, whereas our parents, when they grew up, everybody smoked. It was the cool thing to do. It was glamorized on TV and in the movies. So we had some awareness around that, but we didn't have the same level of awareness around Hostess cupcakes. So that's a shame. You had gastric bypass at the age of 39, correct?
Yes.
And can you just describe plainly what is gastric bypass? I think I have a general understanding, but I'd love to hear you tell like what exactly is happening and how serious of a surgery is that?
Yeah. It's a serious surgery because they go in and they create a small pouch of your stomach. So you can only put in about 2 tablespoons at the beginning. It does stretch out later, but it's a very small pouch. And so you don't feel hungry because of restriction, but they also remove a portion of your intestine, and that's the malabsorption portion of the surgery. So you don't absorb as many calories as you normally would, but you also don't absorb as many nutrients. So you have to be very, very diligent about your vitamins forever after that. Otherwise, you'll become malnourished.
Okay.
And in the early days, there was a lot of risk of hernias. Um, just the risks were higher than they are now. Now you can do gastric bypass with a Da Vinci robot. And I can remember going to the hospital and explaining to my husband on the way to surgery, it's like, okay, so if something happens to me, this is where the insurance money is for the life insurance. And you need to make sure you don't pay off the house with the life insurance. I was telling about all the finances and the steps that he needed to take just in case.
Yeah.
So it was scary going into it at the time.
I can only imagine. So you said you shed 100 pounds in 9 months.
Yes.
How did that change you mentally? That's an amazing accomplishment after having gone your entire life of carrying the physical weight, but also the emotional weight of being a person who struggled with weight to then suddenly have shed 100 pounds in 9 months. Did that enliven you? What was your mental state from that?
For me, it was freeing because I had surgery in September. By March, I had started running. And so by March, I had dropped enough weight that it no longer hurt to move.
Amazing.
And you're just shrinking each day early on. So you're buying new clothes and you're buying clothes off the rack that you never thought was possible before. And so I went from a size 24 down to a size 4.
Wow.
So I had never worn a size 4 all the way through high school. Never. And so to get that small and then to start getting strong as well. So not only am I getting smaller and smaller, but I'm able to do things that I've never been able to do before. Now, interestingly, as far as my, how would I say it? My body perception didn't really change until about 8 years later when I was able to actually have the cosmetic surgery to remove the excess skin. So even though I was smaller, I was still stuffing the skin into my size 4 pants.
I was going to ask about that. So you eventually had cosmetic surgery. That's how they deal with that.
Yeah. So I had a lot of skin and still like a layer of flab over the top. And so, spandex still was not pretty, not until after cosmetic surgery.
Got it. You said you waited 9 years to do that surgery?
I did a couple of different reasons because partially it's paid out of pocket.
Let's see.
And then also, I didn't want to disrupt my training and be out of commission to heal. But I had ended up with 3 hernias, whether they were related to the surgery or just from being obese, having 2 C-sections, couldn't tell you why. but I had 3 hernias that needed to be repaired. And it's like, well, if you're going to repair the hernias, then you're going to make my belly pretty.
That sounds like a fair trade. So you had your surgery in September. You were running by March. That's
Yeah.
pretty incredible considering the short time. What inspired you to start running in the first place?
So there's a local road race here in Utica, New York. It was for the longest time one of the largest 15Ks in the US. And so it's a big thing. It's the Boilermaker. Everybody who runs is like, oh, are you going to run the Boilermaker? So I had never ran before. And there was this article in the newspaper with this great big headline that was like, get out there and run. And that day when I read it, I felt like it was speaking to me directly. I didn't know that I wanted to be a runner. It was just this article. And it was a true couch to 15K program. People who had never ran a step in their life. So it started out with you would meet with a group of people, you would walk for 9 minutes, you would run for one, and you'd do that 2 more times. So the first time we ran, we only ran for 3 minutes with 9 minute walk breaks. And then the next week it was 8 and 2. The next week it was 7 and 3. And so we just kept increasing the ratio of running until we had finally ran a mile. And then we kept adding on the mileage until we did 9.3. So between March and July, I got ready for the 15K Boilermaker.
Wait, the 15K was your first running race.
No, it was the first thing that I was training for. I did
Okay.
yeah, along
Okay.
the way, I did some 5Ks and 10Ks, but that was the goal race.
Okay. And how did that go?
It was just, again, one of those moments when you set a goal and you're so excited to have achieved it.
Yeah.
You can't help but shed a tear when you cross that finish line.
How old were your kids at this point?
They were still single digits, so they were excited for me because they had watched the change in our family. So before I used to buy junk food for all of us.
Mhm.
And when I had gastric bypass surgery, then it changed the dynamics of the entire family. We no longer ate in front of the television. We all ate at the kitchen table. We didn't eat fried foods anymore. We ate grilled foods. Instead of making a chicken breast for everybody, I would make a chicken breast and cut it up into 3 pieces. And then if somebody wanted more, they could have more. But just everything changed for the whole family, and that's partially why I was successful. Is, a lot of people will say, well, I made the decision for me, I'm not going to force my decision on my family. If you're buying the groceries, then you need to buy healthy food for everybody, not just you. And so they all joined me in this change.
Wow, that
Yeah.
is fantastic and really interesting, especially given how you were raised and you became overweight based on your parents' choices. So you acknowledged that and decided to shift course. Do you think that that would have happened had you not started running, or do you think it was the combination of reducing your weight through gastric bypass and being an athlete? Because I know once you get in that athlete mindset, you become very aware of what you're putting in your body and how you fuel yourself and everything. So, do you think that the athletic side of you informed the diet that you took on and also what you had your kids adopt?
It was complementary. It was adopting the things that I knew that I needed: natural foods and good healthy proteins and occasional sweets. I live by a philosophy now that 80% of food should fuel my body, 20% should fuel my soul. And what I mean by that is there are certain dishes that, you bring with you from childhood, whether it's mom's macaroni and cheese made with whole milk and butter. You have that once in a while. You just don't have it every night. And so I don't limit myself any longer. Food doesn't control me. And so if I choose 80% of my food to fuel my body, then I'm fine. I don't have to count calories. I just eat when I'm hungry,
Mhm.
um, and make sure that I have all the things that I enjoy snacking on. I love red cherries and watermelon and having things that are available to me. When I was first starting to run and do endurance sports, I had to figure out how to get extra calories because my pouch was so small.
Mm.
So I would eat a couple of dates because they were like 140 calories a piece. And I would laugh because in my pre bypass days, I would be like, okay, so I need to have a salad because I can have a half a gallon of salad and it would only be 10 calories. And so it was just the opposite of trying to figure out what I needed to make sure that I could do the things that I wanted to do.
Do you have a guilty pleasure food today? What's your today's version of your banana split?
Oh, it's still chocolate. Not a lot, not a lot, but I like chocolate.
I'm with you on that. Okay, so in July, it was 2007 that you did your 15K. Is that
Yep.
correct? What was your next goal after your 15K?
I just kept going that year. So I did 15K, half marathon, marathon, all in that first year.
So
Um,
within 1 year of having gastric bypass surgery, you did how many races culminating in a marathon?
oh, I was probably racing every weekend with 5Ks. Any road race that came along, I was registering. But the big goal was Philadelphia Marathon. I wanted to go under 6 hours, and I did 5:55, I think. And it was a challenge because, of course, this is a brand new newbie runner. But again, it was very satisfying to be able to look back and do that when I didn't know there was an athlete in me.
Yeah, yeah, it's really amazing. When you ran the Philadelphia Marathon, did you continue with that walk run protocol?
For the most part, I was doing a run walk. It was necessary at that point in time. I was still, let's see how to put this. I was still having dumping syndrome from the gastric bypass. When you consume too much sugar, then you have diarrhea.
Hmm.
And so it was frequent stops in the porta johns until I figured out how to fuel endurance sports.
And what was the trick there? How did you get that figured out?
Eventually, I moved to Infinity. It's a liquid fuel source. And so that way I can sip, sip, sip the whole time and get my calories in without a bolus of sugar.
Got it. Do you use gels?
I can use them now. At the very beginning, they were explosive.
Okay, got it. And all right, so you conquer all of those running races. Then how did you make the transition into triathlon? And when was your first triathlon? Like, I'd love to understand that arc.
Sure. So, if you do all that much running in the first year of being a runner, you get shin splints.
Hmm.
Um,
There, I've experienced that.
so I bought a bike because I didn't want to regain my weight until I get rid of the shin splints. And so I added biking to just my normal exercise routine, and it was nice cross training for my running. And then there was an advertisement for the Iron Girl Sprint Triathlon in Syracuse. And it's like, well, I guess I need to learn how to swim. And so I learned how to swim and signed up for the Iron Girl. Did that again, did an Olympic. And by 2009, the Syracuse 70.3 had come to town, and I registered for that. And so now I was building onto my endurance sports and continuing down that path. My oldest brother, actually is an Ironman. He's 20 years older than I am. He is my stepbrother from my father's side. And so Trey was always athletic. He did marathons. And at age 77, he's still doing half Ironman competitions.
Um,
And so when I registered for the 2012 Lake Placid, he registered. And so I did my first Ironman with my oldest brother.
oh, that's amazing. All right, so there's a lot there. And also, we should mention for anybody who might watch this, a 70.3 race is a 1.2 mile swim, 56-mile bike ride, and a half marathon, 13.1 mile run. So What point did you start to identify as being an athlete? Like by the time you did that marathon, did you think of yourself as an athlete, or did you just think of yourself as an everyday person who is trying to stay sane and just doing these things? Like, did your identity change?
I don't think my identity really changed until 2016. Even though I was racing, I was a participant.
Okay.
But in 2016, I did Ironman Mont Blanc, and I had taken 2 hours off my time from my first Ironman. And it was not, I didn't have a coach back then. It was like, I think I want to go to Kona. If I want to go to Kona, the championship of Ironman, I guess that must make me an athlete. And so at that point, I hired a coach and I started making that attempt to become a Kona, earn a slot to Kona and be a world champion. And so it was this isn't just swim, bike, run for fun. I think I can be competitive. And that was something new for me. I had always been competitive when it came to grades. I wanted that 100, but never competitive on the field. And I think one thing I should say about this whole journey is the reason why I've been successful is because I found community. From
Mm.
that very moment of that first couch to 15K, there were people who poured into me with patience and support that, Cassie May, you can do this. You're
Mhm.
strong enough to do this. And so anytime it's like, yeah, no, that's not me, there was someone to say, yeah, you can do this. Even after gastric bypass, there was a group of people on one of the weight loss boards. So this was a group of gastric bypass people who were athletes. And so they were sharing their stories. So celebrating each other for that first 5K, that first 10K, that first sprint triathlon, and then working through all those things, whether they were fears or issues with fueling, of okay, well, if you had gastric bypass surgery and you can be an Ironman, I can too. So you end up in finding people that are just so inspiring. And that has been a lot of what I've done along the way since I've joined the sport. I've infected other people because then it gives me people to train with, people to play with. And and that's, I would say that's really why I've been successful. Loneliness is as deadly as any
Yeah.
addiction. And when you can find community that shares a place where you can lift each other up, it's transformative.
I love that. And I share that sentiment, having been very heavily involved with endurance sports for a big period of my life. And that was a function of being part of a LA-based triathlon club called the LA Tri Club, where we raced and trained together. That was our life. And there was a social element of it as well. So I can identify with that a lot. And it just normalizes what on the outside looks really, to some people, crazy, doing races every weekend and just doing half Ironmans and Ironman races without giving a lot of thought to it. When that's what everyone in your community is doing, you just do that as well. So I really appreciate that. You mentioned the online community for gastric bypass patients. Is there a name for that? I'd love to give that a shout out for anyone who might be watching and want to find that community. And secondly, did you have your equivalent of an LA Tri Club up where you live in upstate New York?
Sure. It was obesityhelp.com. Right now, the exercise board doesn't seem to be as active as when I had my surgery, but I'm sure that there are other Facebook groups that are out there with similar kinds of activities.
Okay.
For me, the closest tri club was in Syracuse. So when I was an early triathlete, I would go out there and train with them on Wednesdays. But then as I built my own little community of people to train with here, now I have close friends. There are 4 of us that are going to be doing Lake Placid together in 2 weeks, which is going to be fun because one of them is a first timer.
Mm-hmm.
Another is a second timer that I talked into doing it with me last year. And then the fourth is Andrea, who's young enough to be my daughter. And she started doing Ironman with us when, oh gosh, probably 2019, I think. It's like you bring people into the sport and then you continue to have family.
Yeah, that's wonderful. All right, so winding back the clock a little bit, you did your first sprint triathlon, which was Iron Girl, and that was in 2009?
I think Iron Girl was, I'd have to look back. I'm not sure of the date
Yeah.
for Iron Girl, but it was early. And then 2009 was Syracuse.
Okay, got it. And so how did Iron Girl go for you? Did you feel confident throughout the entire race? I know you had to learn how to swim, and obviously you figured that out.
I did much better than I expected because I am a strong cyclist. Didn't know how strong of a cyclist that I was. Running is still always going to be hard for me, but I can bike fast. So that's been my strength moving forward and why I was able to do so well in Lake Placid, even on the hills.
Got it. And so your first Ironman was Lake Placid. What was that like crossing the finish line for your first Ironman? And I believe, what year was that? Do you remember?
2012.
So 5 years after having gastric bypass surgery, you cross a finish line as an Ironman. That it almost brings tears to my eyes. Did you feel emotional when you crossed the finish line?
Um, I did. I had trained with Endurance Nation. It was an online group, but at the same time, they had had a training camp in Lake Placid. And so I saw a lot of familiar faces on the course, saw a lot of familiar faces from the Central New York Tri Club. I'm part of a running club in Rome, Roman Runners, and they surprised me and they came up and they were on the course cheering for me. And so you just, even though it was a hard thing, it was 15 hours and 43 minutes because it was my first, there were people just cheering for you like you were a champion on that course. And just to finish and to see that your body could do that for that many hours and keep moving. And then the next morning, my brothers and sisters and I, we went for a hike the next morning. I didn't think I'd be able to walk. It's like, oh my gosh, so much appreciation of what the body is able to do.
Mhm.
Never would have dreamt it possible.
That is so impressive. So you did Ironman Lake Placid, and not long after, you decided that you were an athlete and wanted to qualify for Kona, the World Championships of Ironman.
Yeah.
And did you?
So I did. It took a bit.
Mm.
2017 was my first year as a coached athlete. And I finished Lake Placid in 12 hours and 23 minutes. I placed seventh. So I was on top of the world thinking that this was going to be a piece of cake. Because if I could do seventh, it's not going to take much more to get me there. But it did take a little bit. 18, I overtrained and I pulled my hamstring several times and had to withdraw. 2019, I was at the top of my fitness. I knew that 2019 was the year it was going to happen. For those who do Training Peaks, my Training Peaks TSS was, my fitness score was like 155 because of the number of hours that I was working. But 5 weeks before Lake Placid, I had an awful bike accident and lots of injuries. But the most serious one was I damaged the sixth nerve in my brain and I had double vision. And so I had double vision for 9 months after that because they didn't want to do any kind of surgery until they were sure that the nerve was not going to regenerate. And so it's Wednesday before Ironman Lake Placid, and sitting in the office with the neurosurgeon, and I say, Dr. Kenda, so is there anything on my MRI that suggests I shouldn't do this race? And he says, Cass, you shouldn't do this race. I said, no, 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 that's not what I asked. I said, is there anything on my MRI that suggests I shouldn't do this race? And he said, you want to do this race, don't you? And I said, if it's medically possible, yes, I do. And he said, deep breath. He says, don't get kicked in the swim. Don't fall off your bike. Go have fun. And so I did. I wore an eye patch for that race. I had an exit strategy because I knew what the level of injuries were going into the race. I had separated my shoulder. I had a small crack in my clavicle. I had a lot of stuff going on. I ended up walking the marathon because I did get dizzy after I got off the bike. But I finished. And then, of course, we know what happened in 20.
Well,
Nothing
so
happened.
yeah, before you go
Go ahead.
there, were you still experiencing double vision when you did the Ironman race?
Oh, yeah. I wore an eye patch so
Oh,
that
that,
I,
I see. That's was for the double vision.
yeah, so I closed off one eye so that I could see with single vision.
Oh my God, that is wild. And it wasn't clear to me the span of time between your serious bike accident and the race. What was that? Like
5 weeks.
5 weeks. And what happened? What caused the accident? Was it a car?
No, going down a hill really fast and was getting ready to take a turn, and my front wheel came off. It was just a weird accident. And so I was unconscious. They took me to the hospital. I broke my orbital on my eye. Um, yep, it was an ugly accident. But I was so fit that I was able to finish well under the 17 hours, even walking.
What was your time for that race?
Oh, I think I was just over 15 hours. I don't have my notes in front of me.
Oh, that was 2019. Yeah. 1443 is what I have in my notes.
Okay, so 1443. 1443 walking the marathon because I had a strong bike and a good swim and with a broken orbital. So that kind of gives you an idea of springing forward. Here I sit doing an Ironman just before our open heart surgery. I have been down a medical path before where I had to make decisions, and I had an exit strategy. If there was anything that had gone wrong, that I felt funky, I was just going to DNF. And that's the plan for this one as well, is if there's anything funky, then I will stop. I wouldn't put my life at risk.
So let's talk about Kona. You ultimately qualified for Kona
Mm.
and raced Kona. What was your qualifier? I assume after your Ironman Lake Placid.
Yeah, so nothing in 2020 because of COVID. 2021, I qualified for Kona in Ironman Lake Placid. There were more women's spots that year because this is when they had changed the championship to a 2 day race. So the women competed in Kona on Thursday and the men on Saturday or Sunday. So there were more slots to be had in my age group. And so I did not know when I finished that I had qualified because they did the qualification and roll down all by email. And so I had already signed up for Chattanooga to try again and then found out that I had qualified.
Fantastic. And then you raced Kona in 2021.
2022 because yeah, COVID was still very strong, and so they postponed the October race to February, and then they postponed the February race to October, so I had to wait a year before I got a chance to go.
And how was that for you? Were you nervous walking into that?
I was because I'm not a strong open water swimmer without a wetsuit.
Mm.
And so I swam pretty much all that season in every lake without a wetsuit just to make sure that I was going to be able to complete it. And then the swim was just magical. I didn't realize how buoyant the ocean water was going to be. And I felt like I had a wetsuit on and the water was beautiful. And I got out and it was just amazing.
Do you see sea life when you're doing that
Oh,
swim?
yeah. Oh, yeah, saw fish. Didn't see any of the turtles though, and it was fantastic.
Okay.
And the bike was hot, as everybody knows, and the run was brutal because it was hot. But to have succeeded at that, and again, here is this fat kid that transformed, overcame injury and all kinds of craziness to dance on the big stage.
That's amazing. So inspiring. So, do you have any triathlon heroes? I mean, everybody is at this race. This is the who's who because it's the World Championship. Is there anybody that inspired you as a Ironman athlete? I know you had your brother you mentioned, but somebody maybe on the pro circuit that you were inspired by at that point.
Well, you couldn't help but be inspired by Daniela. It's like here she gets stung by a jellyfish and still powers her way to the front and overtakes. She's just amazing in their longevity.
Mhm.
So I would say that she always came top of mind.
Yeah, so many inspiring stories there. So you finish Kona. This is in 2022, and not long after, you had another medical experience in the form of a heart attack.
Yeah, I had my first heart attack before Kona, and
Okay.
then and so I competed at Kona. And subsequently, my performance as an athlete started to decline. It got harder and harder to do what I do, particularly on the run, because it's just breathing hard. I used to be able to run 10-minute miles. Now, in order to be able to keep my heart rate at 130, I'm doing 11:30 pace or a 12 pace with walk breaks in order to be able to keep my heart rate at what I need it to be. So you know that there's something not right. And like I said, I was under the care of a cardiologist. I was having echocardiograms every 6 months. And so we knew that the valve was getting narrower, but I wasn't at that point yet where surgery was recommended.
Got it. All right. So I feel like you just glossed over the fact that you had a heart attack while training for Kona, which I feel like that is probably a very relevant thing for my audience, which I hope to inspire people about heart health awareness and whatnot. So, can we just wind back a bit to talk about what point in your training? Kona's in like October, correct? So, October
Yeah.
2022. At what point did you have a heart attack, and what was the like specific experience? Were you out training when you suddenly had chest pains, or what was your heart attack experience like?
So it was March. So it was early in the season. I was on my trainer downstairs. I was doing a 2 hour bike ride. I had done a hard interval. I was in the midst of a recovery and I had the elephant on the chest feeling. So it was classic heart attack symptoms. Oftentimes, women have symptoms that are not quite everyday symptoms. It's like, this kind of hurts or that kind of hurts. But for me, it was, yep, this is a heart attack. This doesn't feel good. It felt like I had a cramp in my chest. So I got off the bike, not knowing if it was a blockage or anything of that nature. I took aspirin and then went to the emergency room. And I'm still like, okay, maybe this isn't. But my troponin levels were elevated, and then they went ahead and shipped me to Syracuse St. Joseph's for a cardiac cath. The cardiac cath came back clean and had the echo, and that was when the bicuspid valve, stenotic valve, was diagnosed. And so that's when we started monitoring me closely.
Okay, and so that's in March. You had your eyes set on Kona. Did you feel like that might have been in jeopardy? And how did you reconcile that with your medical team?
So at the beginning, when it first happened, it's like, oh my God, I've qualified for Kona, and how am I going to get there now? But I had a heart attack on a Saturday. I had a cath on a Monday. And when I asked my cardiologist, when can I start training again? He said, Wednesday after you see me. And he said, your vessels were clear. And you're just going to have to be careful and monitor your heart rate from here and see me if you have any concerns, because I had no blocked vessels. It
Mhm.
was just the valve.
Got it.
And, I don't know how much COVID plays into this, but I had a bout of COVID just before I had the heart attack. This year, when I had chest pain, I had COVID just before I had this next round of chest pain. Are they related? I don't know, but it's awfully coincidental
Mm,
that prior to both incidences, I had COVID.
got it. I feel like I have to ask this question because a lot of people would probably be annoyed if I didn't ask the question. And I'm not really a conspiratorial person, but it's worth understanding. Did you have vaccines? And do you think that that may have had any impact on your heart?
Yeah, so I was vaccinated. I don't know the long-term implications of that.
Hmm.
At the very beginning, I felt like I had won the lottery because I was in healthcare, and so I was eligible to get it early.
Hmm.
Um, and so I was enthusiastic about getting the vaccine.
Hmm.
Subsequently, now at this late stage, now that the virus is more limited in its impact on people, I have chosen not to continue to be vaccinated. The last time I was vaccinated, I had what to me was a reaction. I developed congestive heart failure like symptoms, so I gained 5 pounds of water weight. My extremities were swollen. So from going forward now, I've opted not to.
Got it. Okay. I can appreciate that. So your training was slightly derailed. When you got back to training, you were under the orders to keep your heart rate below 155.
Yeah,
Okay.
and that was doable as we continued to train for Kona. My performance just started my performance was not as good.
Hmm.
You know, it was harder to breathe. And so it was progressing in terms of the stenosis was progressing, but it wasn't until 2025 that I had chest pain again. So I didn't have chest pain from once I had lowered the heart rate, I was good all the way to this year.
What was your approach to Kona? Were you going in to be competitive, or were you going in thinking, man, the competition was getting into Kona. I'm going to go into Kona and enjoy this. Okay, so you gave yourself the mental grace to just train how you needed to train to get to the starting line, and you would figure out how to get to the finish line.
And enjoy every moment. The only thing was is at the very end, the announcer said, "Okay, so we've got one more that we can get in under 14 hours, but she's going to have to sprint." And
Okay.
so that one was a 13:59 because
You
I had
got
to
it.
sprint to the end because the announcer said go.
Was that Mike Riley?
Yes.
Fantastic. What a legend that guy is. Well, all right. So that's amazing. Finishing Kona. I mean, just keeping in mind where you started your journey. It's just really impressive. You finished Kona, and as you've already suggested, mentioned you had a bicuspid valve. Can you just explain in your terms what a bicuspid valve is for those who might not be aware?
So an aortic valve is typically 3 leaves, but I was born with only 2 leaves. And historically, for people who have a bicuspid valve, if they're going to have any kind of valve disease, it tends to happen 10 years younger than someone with 3 leaves. And so here I sit at age 57, and my bicuspid valve has thickened. And so the leaves don't move as well, and they're stiff and narrow. They've got calcifications on them.
Got it. And that's causing you pain. And
Then it's causing it. I don't get as much oxygen because the heart has to pump harder in order to get blood where it needs to go. And so it causes me shortness of breath when I'm trying to run anything faster than a 12-minute pace.
got it. And so you are due to have surgery in a month. What will that surgery entail? Is it a complete valve replacement?
Yep, I've opted for a complete valve replacement. The bicuspid valve is not a candidate for what's called a TAVR. They can't go through the artery in order to replace it. And so they will do a complete open heart procedure for me and replace the valve. I have chosen to go with a tissue valve instead of a mechanical valve, although a tissue valve will likely have to be replaced in about 15 years because they do wear out. I did not want a mechanical valve because then you're on blood thinners the rest of your life. And I've had 3 bike accidents over the last, 15 years. And so the risk of bleeding out from a serious bike accident, I didn't want to take that risk. In addition, I feel that over time they're going to continue to improve on these valves with going with a tissue valve now. 15 years from now, if I need a replacement, then they would be able to do the TAVR and it wouldn't be open. The new valves are manufactured so that they can accept a valve and valve in the future.
Great. I really appreciate you sharing that. I had to make the same choice between a tissue valve or a pig valve or a synthetic valve before my open heart surgery in 2022. And the reason for that was, I mean, they were going in to repair my aortic aneurysm, my aortic root, and they weren't sure if they were going to preserve the valve or not. And so they needed to understand which of the two options I wanted to choose. And for pretty much the same reason, I chose a pig valve as well. I didn't want to go on blood thinners and have all the associated risks of that being an athlete. Fortunately, they didn't need to replace my valve, so I lucked out there. So, where are you having your surgery done?
It's at St. Joseph's in Syracuse. So it's a highly rated heart program. And I have the advantage of working in healthcare. And so being able to talk to people and look up the surgeon's outcomes. So I'm very confident in the surgeon that I've chosen to do the procedure.
Okay,
And
great. And so right now you're training for Ironman Lake Placid for this must be your sixth time or so. You probably have lost
yeah,
count.
I think this is my 6th Placid.
Okay, so your sixth Lake Placid. You're under the heart rate constraint of 130. If I might ask, are you wearing a Garmin?
Yes,
Is that what you use to track your heart rate?
heart rate.
All
Yep,
right.
it just beeps.
Okay. Do you use an Apple Watch at all?
No.
No, okay. I train with a Apple Watch and a Garmin, like when I go and run, but like I wear my Apple Watch around the clock because I like tracking my sleep and I like all of the other bells and whistles that go with it, the EKG monitoring and all the other things. I think it's like a real great tool for people that are vulnerable to heart issues as well. But it's definitely good to know what you use. At this point, you've done Ironman Lake Placid 6 times. I feel like you could probably do this race in your sleep. You're under this constraint of not exceeding 130 beats per minute. How are you feeling? Are you excited for this? You're probably not going in to be super competitive at this stage, given your constraints. Is that fair?
Yes. So I'm going into this for fun. I've done the training, so I know I'll be able to finish, but there's no time goals for this race. I've had the joy of training with, like I said, with a friend of mine. So I did a fair amount of my long training by myself when I was trying to be competitive. But I've done almost all of my long rides and long runs with my friend Jen, which has been just a lot of fun. And so I will be able to do the same thing on race day as the race will be outside of me. I'll be able to just interact with all the athletes around me without thinking about not thinking about a goal or a time. I have been doing fine on my swims. I typically do an overswim. So I did 5,000 last week, 5,000 yards at a 205 pace with keeping my heart rate down. So I'll be able to swim just fine. My bike, I've changed some of the way that I approach it is like I do tend to do a little bit of a lower cadence because if I do a lower cadence, then I can keep my heart rate down. Normally, I would do a cadence of 87 to 90, and now 80 to 85 is better.
Okay.
So I know how to change the race in order to get still some of the outcome. The run is going to be the hardest. The run I will do at a walk run ratio. What seems to work right now is if I run for 5 minutes and walk for 20 seconds, then I can keep my heart rate settled and then just keep going.
That's not a lot of walking. I mean, 20 seconds is like that's that's a pretty brief pause.
It's just enough to give me room for it to go down.
That's amazing. One other thing that crossed my mind while you were describing being in your basement in March having a heart attack on your trainer is also the fact that it's, I live in LA, so this is probably something that I think about, and you probably just take it for granted. I have good weather year round. You're in the basement. I'm guessing you're in upstate New York. In March, it's probably still snowing.
Yes.
It's not easy being an Ironman athlete in upstate New York or any place that is snowing in March. Being on the trainer and doing 2, 3, 4 hour bike rides, that's misery. And that takes a lot of mental fortitude as well. So, as if your story is not impressive enough, I just want to acknowledge and double click on that point because, man, it's one thing to, be an Ironman, but you can walk outside and it's 60 degrees, 50 degrees at its lowest, and maybe encountering some rain. But where you are, you have snow and you cannot get on your bike and go for a ride. So that is incredibly impressive.
This year was particularly challenging. We had one of those snowy years. So typically I would run outside year round, regardless of the weather. You just dress for it. But the roads were so awful this year with the ice and the snow and the snowbanks. So there was no safe place to run outside. So, it's like at least if you could get outside for the run, the trainer wasn't so bad. But when you have to do the treadmill and the trainer, oh, but yeah, so we definitely look forward to nicer weather. I'm one of those people that as soon as it's 40 degrees and the roads are dry, I'm on my bike outside.
40 degrees. Yeah, that's pretty amazing. All right, well, this has been great. We should probably wrap it up, but I would love to know what words of wisdom you might share with somebody who is watching this that might be in the same shoes that you were before your gastric bypass surgery, somebody who's struggled with weight challenges, or somebody who has struggled with heart issues and they feel like my life has come to an end because of my heart ailments. And your answers may or may not be different for both of those groups. So I would love for you to share some wisdom with those people.
So my takeaways through all this journey has been a couple. One, from an eating perspective, is we do have to eat more protein and we need to eat protein first. And then we can add all of the other things around us, because if you put protein in your belly first, there's less room for all the other extra calories. And that was a lesson that, from eating lots and lots of Twinkies and Hostess and those types of things, is from a food perspective, find those things that you enjoy eating. If you don't like cauliflower is always going to be a diet food for you. Don't eat it. Find something else that's a good substitute that you actually enjoy and that's good for you. And so that fits both if you are trying to eat a healthier heart diet or lose weight. There's no sense in eating food that you don't like.
Mhm.
And there's plenty of good, healthy foods that taste good. So that's my number one takeaway is find food that's both, that's good and healthy and that you like. Um, and that you do need a good medical team that knows you. It would be very easy for the cardiologist to take the easy way out and tell me to stop instead of moderate my activity. And watching some of my friends go through different things and how they've adapted their lives, that gives me hope that regardless of what happens to me, I will always find another way to move and another way to find community. So, it's like when my friends have double knee replacements and can't run anymore, how do they maintain their social connections to our group? And I've watched them. It's like, okay, so, and sometimes they have to join another group and join a walking group or a pickleball group. But ultimately, it is about connection. and you may have to change your identity a bit. If you always considered yourself a runner, that's not really who you are. You are you, and you just need to find who the new you is, what's going to keep you active and happy. And for some of us, we need time alone in order to process our lives, and that's good, but not to lose community, because that's where we connect, and that's the space where we really live.
That's beautiful. One last question. Do you have any spiritual practices, whether they be religion or meditation or even mindfulness practices like journaling? Do you follow any such practices to keep you grounded mentally?
For both. So I am a Christian, and so I fall back on my faith through all of this to get me through. But also, just that mindfulness of settling my mind in order to just be at peace, particularly when I'm outside and just soaking up everything outside. And anytime I get those negative, intrusive thoughts, reminding myself that I get to, it's like I get to.
Mm,
And that's the bottom line, is all the way through that I gained my freedom, and I'm not going to lose it now because I get to.
gosh, what a great ending. We should give a shout out to, in the spirit of community, we met through an online community. I think it was the Cardiac Athletes Facebook group.
Yes.
If I'm not mistaken. I was inspired by a post and I just reached out because I've been wanting to do interviews like this. That's been a part of my plan for my WellTree passion project. So I'm really honored to be able to initiate that with you. And thank you for making time. I should also give a shout out. There's another group called Aortic Athletes that I'm active in, having gone through an aortic aneurysm. There is so many groups. There's a Zipper Club for people that have experienced open heart surgery. There's so many wonderful Facebook groups that you can join. And you mentioned some around gastric bypass and whatnot. So that is really key. Community is really important throughout all of this. So big shout out to that. Cassie, you're incredible. I promise I will be tracking you on July 20th, Ironman Lake Placid, and just hoping that it goes well. I'm confident that it will, and I will be thinking about you during your open heart surgery, and I will be sure to reach out after that and hear how it went. So I wish you the best.
Thank you, Brian. This was a pleasure, and I hope it helps others that are going through the similar kinds of things to know that we can keep going.
No doubt it will. I really appreciate it. Thank you so
All right.
much.
Thank you. Bye bye.